Okay, thank you very much. So can I draw your attention to the two recommendations that I mentioned in my introductory remarks set out on big page number 38, actually, not going into 39. So I'm going to go round cabinet members who are physically in this room. So that's Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles.
Agreed.
Councillor Carly Parkway.
Agreed.
Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed, Chair.
And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees as well. Thank you very much. Now we're going to be going into the next cabinet paper, which is the agenda item 6, private rented sector offer and placement policies. Now, can I just ask if Councillor Shabar Mohammed is with us now?
Chair, no, he's not. I'm still trying to contact him.
Okay, fine. So, colleagues, I'll just do a couple of brief comments and then I will be passing over to officer colleagues to elaborate as appropriate. So, essentially, colleagues, again, as mentioned, as it pertains to the previous agenda item, which we just now formally approved, this is another component of our wider ambitious housing delivery and housing crisis response offer under this administration. And specifically, this pertains to private rented sector offer and placement policies. And the paper recommends that the council publishes its private rented sector offer and placement policies, two really critical documents that set out how we will make offers of accommodation to those that find themselves homeless or facing homelessness. It's a set of documents that have been long in the development in terms of updating. It's critical in the context of our transparency and good governance agenda, and it also has enabled us to provide or to introduce some minor updates that have been made, that have needed to be made in account of our current programme of work on tackling homelessness and reducing the number of households in temporary accommodation. These policies are already in action, so their publication is a matter of procedure only. And by virtue of publishing these two important documents, they'll have the following benefits. One, I've already mentioned, the transparency and openness about housing decisions for homeless residents. And it's, you know, there's a need for local authorities to publish and be transparent about these policies in line with Supreme Court guidance for councils. And officers, in addition, have agreed to explore how the policies can be made more accessible to residents as part of a wider review of how we present information on housing, particularly online, given the characteristics of our resident population. Specifically, the private rented sector offer policy sets out when the council will make an offer of an assured short-hold tenancy and in what circumstances to a homeless household. It outlines the criteria for suitability, which will be assessed before an offer is made to make sure that it is the best option for the household. And then the placements policy is the document that sets out how households are prioritised for accommodation within Newham. And cabinet colleagues are asked to note that if sufficient properties are available and affordable to the household, that household will be placed within Newham. This policy does not change that, and that is something that we have been promoting and pursuing since we stepped into office back in May 2018. All of us are acutely alert to the seismic challenge of people on our housing waiting lists, but more significantly, the shame that is the significant number of families living in temporary accommodation and children living in temporary accommodation. You've heard me in the past make reference to the fact that we have more residents or households living in temporary accommodation than the entirety of the north of England combined, and that is something that we have committed ourselves in ensuring that we tackle and we deal with appropriately, but it has to be done on the basis of transparency and fairness. And I say this as someone who has experienced for a period of several years the reality of engaging with the council when I was very young, and my family found ourselves in a situation where we lost our home and we were placed in temporary accommodation for several years, and the impact that has on the family, on how you manage trauma of losing your house and your home, issues of stability, the fear of whether or not you're going to be able to remain in the community that you've grown up in and amongst friends and family members, extended family members that you love and are dear to you, is something that also we've got to acknowledge as part of our wider intention and ambition as a council and under this administration, where we place the health, well-being and happiness of all of our residents, regardless of their circumstances, as our number one priority and our number one measure of success, economic success in this borough. So on that point, I will conclude and pause, and I will pass over to the Cabinet Member for Housing Services, who is able, if he wants, to add any other comments to her paper in his name.
Oh, sorry about that. This is the first time we're publishing the policy, and we have updated it to bring in line with other work we've been doing on preventing homelessness and reducing the use of temporary accommodation. So that's what I was just going to add to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions, colleagues? No. All right, so I'm going to just draw everyone's attention to the recommendations as set out on big page number 54, and for the benefit of those members of the public press that may well be watching via YouTube, I'm just going to quickly read them out. So recommendations 2.1, for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is recommended to 2.1.1, note the private rented sector offer, PRSO policy and the placements policy attached at Appendix 1 and 2 respectively. 2.1.2, note the equalities impact assessment attached at Appendix 3. 2.1.3, agree the publication of the private rented sector offer, PRSO policy and the placements policy online. And 2.1.4, delegate authority to the Director of Housing in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing Services. That should read Housing Services, Clerk. Can we get that amended? Cabinet Member for Housing Services to review and make minor amendments to the policies as a result of case law or changes to legislation and statutory guidance. So can I just call on members of Cabinet who are present in this room to advise if they agree? So Councillor James Asser. Agreed. Councillor James Beckles. Agreed. Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway. Agreed, Chair. Councillor Terry Paul. Agreed, Chair. Councillor Zulfikar Ali. Agreed. Councillor Shabar Mohammed. Agreed. And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees. Have you noted that?
Yes, I have, Chair. Yes.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 7, which is financing the capital programme. And I'm going to be inviting Councillor Terry Paul and then related officers, not literally related, but relevant officers to contribute. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. With me, I've got Conrad Hall, who's the Corporate Director of Resources. This report bringing forward to Cabinet and for members of the public watching on YouTube is important for 2 reasons. One, obviously this is for our borrowing, and obviously this is to fund our ambitions for the future of Newham for our residents. More importantly, to fund our ambitious programme on affordable homes. But more importantly, this is what I say is a physical demonstration of our mission to improve our transparency for the residents of Newham. In the past, when we required borrowing of this nature, it was done by a delegated decision by officers and not without sight of Cabinet. And obviously it led us down the road, and I'll give you an example of Lobos. What we're bringing to Cabinet here is obviously a first phase for our borrowing over the short period, the medium term for the next 12 months, and also to bring it to the attention of what our borrowing is. So obviously this is the first tranche of £70 million over the next 12 months. And obviously one of our major programs is going to be our affordable housing program and other things like that. But I think the key thing is to highlight to Cabinet and to members, Chair. It's just the aspects of transparency that we brought the report here in front of you, and you can see what our plans are in the short and the medium term, and some of the longer term approach we're going to take with regards to that worry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Paul. Conrad, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Hi, evening everybody. It's Conrad Hall, Corporate Director of Resources. Yes, Chair, if you don't mind, I will just say a word or two. It's a fairly substantial report before you, as Councillor Paul has set out, concerning the long-term funding of the capital programme. Just a couple of sort of points of detail, I suppose, and reassurance. It'd be normal for a local authority to undertake this sort of transaction only periodically. You don't want to be sort of entering into borrowing arrangements every day or even every year. So it's right that this is a report that only comes forward quite periodically. The immediate need, as set out in the report, is for 70 million, which we would propose to borrow at some point in the next 12 months. Obviously, we try and defer the actual strike date of any transaction because one doesn't want to be paying interest on the loans until they're absolutely necessary. And as set out in the report, we'd expect to be borrowing that for relatively short durations to take advantage of the current low interest rates, and the source would either be the Public Works Loan Board or another local authority if they could beat those rates. The report also sets out the longer term need, which of course, because that's spread over several years, is much greater and would be a much larger transaction. All that is sought by way of authority at this point is procurement of advisors to help with that very, very large transaction. It's vitally important that the council has the best possible advice on such a transaction of such scale. If you think about it, even every 0.1% saving on interest rate for that, for example, would equate to some £400,000 a year. So it's important that we get the right advice. And then just in terms of governance, so this went through the audit committee last week on the 30th, exactly as you'd expect. That's the role of an audit committee in any organisation to apply some further rigour and analysis of proposals, and obviously is now with Cabinet for decision. Just to be clear about the point Councillor Paul made on governance as well, it's absolutely right that the decision to borrow money must, in my view, be taken by elected members. It's a very substantial decision. Of course, as regards the initial tranche of 70 million, there would be delegation just of the very operational details, precisely what day we would enter the transaction into, precisely what duration of loan would be entered into, and so on. For the longer term borrowing, again, just to be clear, no decisions would be taken on that without us returning at least once to Cabinet once we've got the benefit of the sort of more detailed advice that you'd want for that transaction. And then lastly, just to confirm, this is all, as entirely in line with the budget that was set in February, Appendix 12 to the budget report, if anyone really wants to delve into the detail, with the immediate sum of 70 million very close to the estimate at that stage. Just to sort of pick out a couple of things that would be financed from this. For example, that's the investment in the health and care space Newham programme, or Keep Newham Moving, and just had a couple of important items on housing. Funding, for example, for the Disbury package of some nearly 150 homes. That is the sort of thing that is being funded through these proposals here, with much more detail in that appendix. So I'll pause at that point, if that's okay, Chair, and obviously happy to take any questions that there may be.
Thank you very much. So do we have any questions? I've got a couple, but let me just defer to other colleagues first. Go over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Terry, and thank you, Conrad, for a very responsible approach to capital program management. My only question is, can we give us some example of how this 60 million will be spent? Some indication, if we can provide that today?
Yeah, so I can do that. So what we always try and do on our capital and borrowing is to delay the actual date of borrowing as long as possible. So we use sort of temporary cash balances to fund things as long as we can, because obviously at the point at which you borrow, you're then incurring interest. So it's things in the existing capital programme that would be financed by this, some of which are very much in delivery already. So for example, this year's capital programme, which is what this is financing, includes 23 million investment in the health and care space Newham programme. So that's financing new health premises in collaboration with our NHS partners. There's about 11 million, for example, for the Keep Newham Moving programme, invest in our roads and highways. And one could pick out many examples of the affordable housing programme that is being funded by this. A good one, for example, that's very much active and in delivery is the Didsbury package of some almost 150 homes at half that London affordable rent. So those are just three examples of the sorts of thing that this is financing.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Colleen.
Thank you, Councillor Carlini Parkway, Cabinet Member for Brighter Futures. Thank you, Councillor Paul and your team. Just listening to your opening remarks, both of yourself and Conrad, sorry, you're behind me. I just would like to ask, if you don't mind, why this paper and why now?
Yeah. Thank you. Good question. I think the key thing, the message is transparency and governance. Actually, I think that's the key thing to take away. And again, decisions like this, and it's really important, as members of the Cabinet, the public know, we've had a bit of a battle on low boats, for example, to get out of those complicated products. And perhaps if with more transparency like this, we wouldn't get into those financial products. And for me, this is about just being open, transparent, and we can see what's being done in our name. And also, to get a phrase which I just used before, it's like getting back to vanilla in terms of some of these products. Nothing complicated, be very transparent. And now it's about a demonstration of all that work we've done over the past 3 years in terms of improving our governance and our controls, showing the general public and Cabinet this is where we are. And remember, just to go back, early part of this year, we changed our contract standing orders with regard to our procurement, which stopped officers from entering into financial contracts without our say-so. Yeah. So this is perhaps the other side of the balance. It's showing you, we did that quite techie change in February last year and not in October, Cabinet November last year at full council. But this is again about just showing and demonstrating that governance of what's being done in your name. And as you can see in the report, we're due to come back, if I can find the bit, we're due to come, there's another part of this, we're due to come back, 2.2, Cabinet is requested to note that a further report will be brought forward to make recommendations how the required medium-term borrowing should be structured. So we're showing why now, we're showing you what we're doing now, we're also showing you what we're going to do in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on Councillor Paul's response to the question by Councillor Carlini Parkway. I'm noting on big page number 87, section 3.6, despite the attractiveness of PWLB Finance, Public Works Loan Board, it is worth considering alternatives as even marginal reductions in the interest rate on such a large transaction will clearly generate significant savings. However, only straightforward or vanilla products will be contemplated rather than products with complex embedded derivatives or other features, such as were found in the lender option borrower option. What assurance, just in terms of the organisational know-how, will we be provided as members of Cabinet? We will also be required to consider the future reports following this kind of 12-month requirement. what assurance can you provide us that there's that know-how to be able to readily identify those products that may well be vanilla and straightforward and don't actually have embedded in them some complexities? Because one of the features, arguably, of the whole Lobo debacle was the way in which local authorities were hoodwinked.
I think I will let Conrad answer that, Chair, but also in regards to assurance, in our quarterly Treasury report we provide to Cabinet, we will see, we do set out in terms of what products we are, but I understand the nature of your point, and I wonder if, Conrad, you might want to expand on the sort of buying, I think the Mayor referred to the buying decision.
So, absolutely. I think there are three things. Sorry, am I audible in the room? Yeah. So apologies, thank you. So I think there are three things that I would particularly like to highlight. So firstly, we have already run 2 training sessions for Cabinet and indeed the wider executive, and would continue to do that. There's a lot of expertise in that Cabinet and the wider executive, but there are some quite complex issues behind transactions like this. So it's really important that in making decisions on them as you are, you've been given the appropriate training. The second part of the assurance is around the role of the audit committee. So I've been really clear that this is not an absolute strict legal requirement, but I think it's very much part of good governance that this goes through the audit committee. So they've already considered this and were supportive of the direction of it, and so you have that added assurance that the audit committee, independently chaired and with 2 other independent members alongside the councillors on that, gives this sort of real thorough going over, and you have that assurance from them before it reaches Cabinet, and the same will be true of future reports. And the third one is that general point about transparency. If one considers the longer term, which I think is what we're really focused on here, the whole of this report from section 4, paragraph 4.20 onwards, sorry, I don't have the printed agendas, but paragraph 4.20 onwards, very strictly speaking, none of that needs to be presented now in a strictly legal sense. I mean, all we're actually technically doing is procuring some advisors on that. But given the scale of what is being proposed here, I think it's really important that we're discussing at a very early stage in public, what we think the options are, what the pros and cons associated with each might be, and we'll continue to develop that through the process of what is, again, to emphasise, very significant transaction that the council will in due course be undertaking. So I think those sort of 3 factors together, I hope, provides the assurance that there is the technical expertise and support being given to members in their role in this, a really prominent role for the audit committee, and absolutely from officers, a complete commitment to transparency in the decision making like that.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any further questions? No? All right, we will move to the recommendations. So just drawing your attention to the recommendations on big page number 86 for those that have a hard copy of the agenda pack with them. So for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is recommended to agree, 1, to borrow up to £70 million for the purposes of financing the capital programme over the next 12 months, pending a review to identify the most effective solution for meeting the council's medium-term borrowing requirements, and 2.1.2 to delegate authority to the Director of Resources following consultation with a Cabinet member for Finance and Resources to implement 2.1.1, and finally, recommendation 2.2, Cabinet is requested to note that a further report will be brought forward to make specific recommendations as to how the required medium-term borrowing should be structured. So, Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles.
Agreed.
Councillor James, sorry, not Councillor James. Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Carlini Parkway.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Shabal Mohammed.
Agreed, Chair.
And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees. Thank you very much. Now we're going to be moving on to the next agenda item, which is another financial paper or financial related paper, and this is agenda item 8, overall financial position 2021-2022, and I'll invite Councillor Terry Pawn thereafter, relevant officer, elaborate, introduce.
Thank you, Chair. And with me, I've got Andrew Ward, who's the Assistant Director of Finance and Transformation, to answer some detailed questions on the report. I want to take the Cabinet and members of the public watching through the report. I just want to mention two figures really at the outset. One is on the amount of the deficit, and two on the financial impact of COVID. In May, when me and Andrew reported the figures back, we had a deficit position of £12.5 million in May. We are reporting to Cabinet that that figure is now 5.8 million. So between that period of time from May to now, Andrew and the organisation and officers all around the organisation have managed to reduce our deficit by £6.7 million, which I take my hat off and say thank you to those members of staff in the organisation and everyone who have really been working hard on that. So just to repeat for those members outside, we've managed to improve our position by £6.7 million in reduction. I just want to say something about COVID, which will layer some of the comments which I made earlier. The government said to local council last year during COVID, do what you have to do to protect your residents. And we took them not only at their word, but obviously we care for our residents and we know our vulnerabilities and needs of our residents, and we provided them with important services. A rough estimate of COVID is £24 million, which has cost Newham. To date, we've received £17 million from the government in emergency funding. Thereby, there's been a gap of £8 million. So I'll repeat, we are £6.7 million over our budget. But we've been shortchanged by the government to the tune of £8 million. Just to put that into real context on the street, during COVID, it's important to remind people what we did and what staff did and what the voluntary sector did. We fed people, we housed people, we kept people safe and secure and looked after their well-being. We did that during COVID. And in this position, in terms of taking residents through the Cabinet, I just wanted to take you back in terms of recent history as to how we found ourselves. And I think this is important to talk about that, not just a set of figures. And I think it's important to track the journey where we have been. So since 2018, when we came in, there was a series of poor financial decisions. The Olympic Stadium, the Pleasure Gardens, the use of reserves to balance our budget. And what that was symptomatic of poor controls, on poor governance and poor transparency. We've just seen a report where I presented you with what we're going to do with regards to our capital programme. And perhaps if that was done in the previous administration, we wouldn't be where we are today. But on entering this in office, the Mayor conducted and requested a clean up the books agenda, where we invited the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy to do us a health check to look at where we are. So based on that, we set a budget, a 3-year budget, which was going to take us to another level, not only in service provision, not only in the state of our finances, but also to improve our financial position. It was in early March of last year where I presented the budget, I think from memory on the 2nd of March, and a couple of weeks later, we're all decanting from dockside into our bedrooms and COVID came and hit us. And 18 months later, we're just on the other outside. So, and at that time, when we set the budget, we had savings to do. We've lost a tremendous amount of money since 2010. And we committed to a budget of financial sustainability and considered savings. COVID came along and actually was a bit more of a fair wind to our current processes. But that didn't stop us from looking after our residents, taking that baseline of last year's budget and the 3-year MTS plan and taking it forward. So in presenting this budget, Chair and the Council, you will see we've laid out some of the challenges still for us to do. We are still under, I call it government austerity, despite the government's levying up agenda, despite their impact to look after the most vulnerable. We, as a local council, have to step into the breach. So in presenting this budget to you today, yes, it is a good picture and it shows the hard work we are continuing to do by having just under a £7 million betterment of our position. But we have still a lot of work to do before we get to the end of the financial year, because obviously COVID and, let's be more accurate, future pandemics are still with us. Future economic uncertainty is still with us, and that is international and national economic uncertainty. But I'm convinced with our much more agile council, and don't get me wrong, there's still a lot to do. I think this is a good set of figures. And obviously, in terms of where that performance has come from, you can see on page 3 of the report, or big page 3, if you've got the document in front of you, you'll see a table there where Andrew and the team have broken out our finances via the departments, showed you the budget, showed you the variances, and showed you the movement between quarters. And if that's a useful summary of charting the position of us as a council. Thank you, Chair. And if I can introduce Andrew, if any comments or additional.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Can everyone hear me in the room okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So just in case anyone didn't catch it, yes, my name is Andrew Ward. I'm the Assistant Director of Finance and Transformation. I'll just add a few points to Councillor Paul's summary there. So, I mean, clearly the headline is just really, really good and positive news. The reported overspend has more than halved since the Q1 report. And as Councillor Paul said, that is clearly laid out in the table on page 101 of the agenda pack. So that's a current overspend position of 5.8 million against the general fund total budget of 264 million. And I mean, as Councillor Paul sort of alluded to, really, that has been achieved even whilst the council continues to respond to the pandemic and be impacted upon it. And you spoke about sort of government funding. I'd like to pick up on one perhaps sort of more nuanced point of detail within that, which is the compensation scheme for sales fees and charges, which only ran for Q1 of this financial year from central government. So compensates councils for lost income for the course of their normal activities. I mean, across London, and we're working hard with London councils on this point, we estimate that £200 million is being lost to councils across London. Clearly, that's also impacting Newham and causing some of the financial difficulties we're facing. But you know, we are working and making representations through that body in advance of the spending review later this month, and also just regularly submitting accurate monthly forecasts to central government to make sure that the position the position is well known. For the moment, though, the forecast assumes no additional government funding, as you'd expect. It's a prudent, responsible forecast, and you know, the report, as the report sets out, there has been really good progress being made in bringing that forecast back in line with budget, and there are some additional financial controls being progressed to help support that. Absolutely not complacent about the challenge. We continue to monitor the position, continue to monitor the financial risks, but the sort of trajectory and the progress made today is very positive. So that's the general fund. I think it's worth just making a couple of other notes about the HRA and the DSG. So the HRA is performing well, forecasting just a slight underspend of £500,000 against the budget. And with the dedicated schools budget, that's actually forecasting an in-year underspend. So it would start to bring down the deficit that's been caused by the sort of rise in demand for special educational needs within the schools budget. And the following year, we know there'll be around about 4.8 million of additional funding coming into that high needs block, which will again sort of help meet those increased demands, but also bring down the deficit. So really positive news there as well. So thank you very much for listening to those points. Very happy to take any questions.
Okay, so any questions? Colleen, and then Councillor Zulfikar Ali. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Councillor Paul, thank you for your open remarks, and would like to convey my thanks again to you and your team for this paper. But more importantly, I would like to touch on the issues that we face not only as a borough, but also as a nation. Over time, we have spoken a lot about the impact of COVID on our residents, but I would like to take the opportunity to highlight the continuing investment into our children and young people and our most vulnerable in our communities. There has been an investment of some 43 million into the Children and Young People Service, of which my directorate, Brighter Futures, has received just over 2 million of this money for our Youth Empowerment Service. This money has enabled us to run a service during the most difficult time for our young people, that being COVID. And I think we need to just acknowledge the work that has gone on through these services to ensure that our young people are kept safe during these hard times. We've heard through the Health and Wellbeing Board about the long-term effects of COVID. And my concern is that there is more to come when it comes to COVID. This is not over. And the mental health impacts on our residents is going to be an area that we are going to need to deal with our health partners. So I guess I just wanted to make a comment, I guess, more so than anything else, Councillor Paul, which is I'm really worried about that, because as much as we are in this position and we are doing what we can, in actual fact, as a local authority, we're not receiving the funding we rightly deserve to provide the services that our residents need. So I just want to commend you guys for your hard work, your diligence, and all of us actually, as directorates that have really looked and tried to keep our purse strings tight, even though it doesn't sound like it at 12.9 million at the beginning. But actually, we really are working hard to provide quality services to our residents when they need it the most. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Terry, did you want to respond to that statement?
Just, Colleen, Councillor Zulfikar makes an excellent point. Obviously, you know, there are other, let's say, local authorities for various reasons who are cutting, let's say, running down is perhaps a better word, their new services, what we call Brighter Futures. And I think despite our challenges, and it's tough financially, we are managing to invest. And I think the message, that, you know, that's a really great point that my colleague has made. It's easy to always look at a number in anything we do. And I think it's also very important to realise in the totality of our services, despite the fact we might be shaving a bit here, moving a bit around, I think the totality of what we do, we should always remember, you know, earlier we talked about housing and the good things which Councillor Mohammed is doing with his team. And I think Councillor Zulfikar makes an excellent point about we're still toughened by austerity. We're doing great work. And so, you know, yeah, excellent point.
All right, Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Can I echo my colleague's words in terms of the praise that is deserved by our officer colleagues for their excellent work and due diligence for bringing the deficit down from 12.9 to 6.7. And it is rather unfortunate that the government said spend, and we did quite rightly to put our residents, you know, at the heart of everything we do to make sure we protect them from this pandemic. But clearly, if the government had funded us as we spent, then we would have had a 1.3 million of money which we could have reinvested back into services, you know, which desperately needed. But unfortunately, that isn't the case, and that's something that I'm sure we at member level and officers will continue to press the government to make sure that we are adequately funded to reflect the cost that we've actually incurred. And furthermore, the impact of long COVID, as my colleague said, and the mental health issues, you know, there's a lot that's coming out of it. Clearly, people are now enjoying the normalities of life and are beginning to see what the impact is or going to be in future, and that will have serious implications for what we do in future. But certainly the work that officers have done deserve to be praised, and I think it's a very responsible financial management across the council. It's far better than many other councils, as we hear through the local government circle. So well done to you, Councillor Paul, and indeed the team. Just pushing a little bit further, I know we've reduced the deficit from 12.9 to 6.7. What else are we going to be looking at to make sure that that trend continues before the end of the current financial year? I know I'm pushing a little bit, but is there anything more we can do? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ali. If we to look at it from our own personal perspective, if we were to be overrunning in our household budget, what would we do? You would call to account the individual spending, you would cut the credit cards down, and you wouldn't walk past the shops and say, you know, if I can put it in those terms. And perhaps it's no different from a local authority. We're doing a series of things to bear down on our deficit, and they really break down into 3 areas, and they're mentioned in the report, but just those people who are listening, who won't be looking at the report, I'll just perhaps go into it. One is to look at, we've made a series of interventions to look at direct savings. For example, we banned overtime, we looked at additional reductions on agency staff. So we're looking at those which will bring a direct impact to the cashable savings. That's one. 2, obviously people spend money, right? So obviously what we're doing, we're looking at the behaviours, we call it the behaviours of budget holders. So we're making sure that to those council officers who have got authority for spending, we're just putting in some more training, making sure that we don't use recruitment agencies, and we're making sure just being a bit tighter on what we're buying. And more importantly, the last one is about updating our processes. We're aligning budget management with, let's say, performance, directly. We're making people accountable for what they spend, and we look at those areas. So, and those are things we're doing. And more importantly, just to give you a tangible, there was a plan which I brought forward in May, June time, about our agency spend, for example, on our agency staff. And we had a plan to reduce that agency staff numbers by March next year. What we've done is to bring that forward. So by the end of the year, we will realise those savings on our agency workers, and we've just brought that forward by 2 to 3 months. So there is a whole, just to give them assurance, there's a whole series of work streams and initiatives and direct arcs of our staff going on behind the scenes to make sure we hit our budget, but at the same time delivering great services, and also at the same time improving our ability to be agile.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No. I've just got a few questions stroke comments.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Ruiz. I didn't see you there.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
She's not muted.
Oh, I think it's because the volume was reduced earlier.
Touch your microphone.
No, down, further down.
Go to audio settings. Sarah, just wait for a moment. If you go down to audio settings, right at the bottom.
I think it might be Sarah's actual button on her actual headphones.
Yeah.
Go further down the wire, Sarah.
That's working. Just close it.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's it. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, bloody hell, why? Just really.
Sarah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. I was just really picking up on something that Carleen said earlier about the amount of spending on young people. And I think that we shouldn't underestimate that just actually how important that is. I saw on social media today that Tower Hamlets, our neighbouring borough, is cutting their youth services, and you know the detrimental effects that has on young people can't be underestimated. I mean, we've gone from a service that employed 4 people, or 6 probably, to a service that now employs nearly 50. And the effect that has on our young people is that actually we've always got your back, and that they are our future. And, you know, we actually should be really proud of the amount of money that we're spending on children and young people in this council. For years they were underfunded, to the detriment of not just our statutory services, but to all services to children and young people. And fortunately, we've seen that gap being bridged, but we still have quite a long way to go. But we should never, ever apologise for the amount of money that we spend on children and young people in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from any colleagues that are on Zoom? Nope. Anyone here? Okay, I've got a couple of comments. So, and potentially questions. So look, first observations, really well done to the team, both finance and corporate resources, but also the whole organisation in meeting the requirement to step up and respond to the budget challenge facing us as an organisation, not least because of the end of May period 2 position, where we were reporting 12.5 million, and we're presently at 6.7 million, a 54% reduction. So credit where credit is due, forgive the financial pun, if it's that obvious. But I do also want to reassure members of the public and also convey a really important message to members of Cabinet and the wider executive, but also more importantly, the organisation. We will continue to ensure that we demonstrate our financial robustness and our adherence to our necessary financial controls, because the council will remain financially solvent under this administration. And I know that over the coming weeks and coming period, there will be a scrutiny of every single element of this report that's been presented to Cabinet via the scrutiny process under the auspices of Budget Working Party. And I don't want for the organisation and Cabinet members to you know, certainly celebrate and embrace the investments that we've made in key areas, specifically our children and young people. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be held account for financial overspends. I'm particularly looking at the sections as it pertains to the overspends as they've emerged. Well, sorry, the inability to meet the savings as they pertain to children and young people, the care levers, local pressures, the lack placements, and also brighter futures. I'd like to understand better, and just for public record, the public health element of that. And then similarly, I remain concerned about the one source contribution to the inability to achieve the savings and the pressures that they're under, particularly with regards to non-shared services, as well as the one source shared services, specifically the pressures at Dockside in relation to the business rates liability, the increased rent payable at Thornham Grove, and the various kind of budgetary pressures that have been flagged up in ICT and asset management and finance. So if those could just be elaborated on, or can I be provided some clarification in the public interest, given that public members of public are watching this? And no doubt all of these areas will also be diligently scrutinised by our colleagues in Budget Working Party.
I'll take On the CYPS one, Mayor, I will assure you, and I think Sarah, Councillor Wills have much more detail, but there's a significant amount of work which is going on there to reduce their overspend. And for example, I will let Sarah, I'm trying to remember the figure, but there's been a really good impact on converting agency staff into permanent. And it's been a really good, I think, I'm trying to remember the figure, but I won't in case I get it wrong and I corrupt the record. But that's been a really good piece of work by CYPS despite their challenges. And also, you know, there's other things looking at their care placement plan, the various other things. But obviously, as we know, they're subject to demand more so, but it's really good work. On OneSource, there are, I can assure the Mayor, a series of discussions, if not on a weekly basis, I mean discussions, some interrogation as to what we can do, and more importantly, not just on the plan, it's also when the savings will be given. For example, one of the things I'm looking at in OneSource is the corporate procurement function, how that can deliver value for the organisation. And there's a piece of work we're looking at as to look at current contracts as to where what we're saving, and also future contracts. So there's a piece of work to help the directorates with their current spend and future spend. So there's a lot of work there. On ICT, I can come back to you, but again, as Patrick Montgomery, the new IT director, is looking at ICT and looking at where we can provision it. And also there's a whole series of work amongst those areas you mentioned to bring the overspend deficit to bear. I don't know whether Andrew or Conrad might want to add to what I will say.
Thank you. Conrad, Andrew?
Andrew, do you want to take that one? And then
I wanted just to pick up on one point there. So clearly the report identifies some pressures and has just been mentioned in OneSource. ICT was mentioned there. It's probably worth flagging that. That was one of the areas, due to a lot of in-depth work by the managers of ICT, they've actually managed to reduce that forecast overspend. So it has come down. They're continuing that work to see what can be done to manage the budgets and comb through their expenditure lines, making sure it's all essential. So I expect there to be, continued improvement as work like that goes on across OneSource.
And just to add, if I may, a sort of assurance to to all of Cabinet and everyone watching this meeting, we're putting a tremendous amount of focus as been set out, and will not ease up on that in looking at you rightly identified, Chair, some of the most challenging overspends that we face, but right across the council, that focus is really, really strong, and we'll keep it up.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So you managed to make sure my mic was working this time. So on the, we have 44 new starters in children's services starting at the end of October. So I think we've gone from a 48% agency or permanent staff up to 65%. So that's no mean feat. We have a huge recruitment campaign going on at the moment. The children's placements, I mean, it's a long-standing pressure on the basis that it is a seller's market. So we are bound by that market. But I can assure you that Christina Pace in Children's Commissioning is going through every single placement that we have, looking at how we can save money. But it's also important to recognise that sometimes we can't just move children and young people. That destabilises them. So, but I would like to say that we have had huge support from Andrew and Conrad into looking at how we can further reduce our deficit. I think I'm right in saying that we've identified 1.5 million of mitigating action is on track by the end of the year. And period 5, I believe, the forecast for looked after placements has been reduced by 0.65 million. So we are doing everything we possibly can, but it's not an easy task.
Yeah,
I hope that reassures you.
Yeah, no, and I also appreciate some aspects of this are out of our control. So I'm noting section 5.4 on the no recourse to public funds and the pressures of 1.4 million.
Absolutely.
And it points to two things. One, you know, the risks of us actually of not doing anything, have the cohort of our community that literally are destitute. And we have a moral purpose in what we do. But similarly, us needing to up the ante and maintain pressure on national government to ease the condition for those with no recourse to public funds, and how that's very much linked to and needs to be linked to our campaigning efforts around the hostile environment. And then similarly, the continuing lack of funding from national government as it pertains to children's services generally.
Yeah, and also adding to that, the number of unaccompanied asylum seekers that we take, not begrudgingly take, but actually we take our fair share. And if the rest of the country were to take their fair share, we not only us in Newham, but the rest of London, who take more than their share, that would reduce our costs as well, because we do not get the full amount of money that is required for the unaccompanied asylum seekers. So, you know, it is a difficult terrain to tread, but we will do our very best to reduce that overspend by the end of the financial year.
All right, and then Colleen, on big page number 106, you've now got an overspend of 0.6 at period 5, when at period 2 forecast it is 0.1. And I've noted due to MTFS savings allocated to public health. So are you able to elaborate what's happened there?
Yep, so in regards to the actual funding of the public health grant, there are services that we provide through the children's health part of my directorate, and some of those positions are filled with again agency staff. So we've been working diligently with public health colleagues to make sure that we keep under control the budget position as it currently stands. We have some MTF savings that we are continuously trying to work down, which were previously agreed, and so we're still working that through. Obviously, last year we had money saved in certain areas of which we use within our whole budget area. So we literally are working closely with our colleagues in public health, and obviously within our own directorate, keep a diligent eye on all the overspends that are happening. But we are looking to make sure that we come in on budget by end of year.
Okay, and maybe a conversation outside of this meeting. How and will you be able to provide assurance to myself and other members of Cabinet, given the expansion and investment around youth service provision is a manifesto commitment? And how can you ensure the other elements or areas of Brighter Futures Directorate aren't impacted because of the health component, early years health component of your directorate that's led to a position where in month 2 or period 2 forecast it was 0.1 and now period 5 it's 0.6 million?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Have the conversation outside. I think a last thing I would say in regards to that is we are committed within Brighter Futures to safeguard the budgets around the Youth Empowerment Service, as this was a manifesto commitment, and actually more so than anything, we believe totally in the investment of our young people. I guess part and parcel will be about working around how we use money efficiently in order within the children's health part of our budget and the early help part of our budget, but notwithstanding making sure that we still provide those critical early intervention services that we need to.
And just by way of quick final follow-up, notwithstanding sort of the comments around youth empowerment and sort of manifesto commitments, we also recognise corporately and as an administration the importance of health, wellbeing and happiness. So in terms of the early years health component and its contribution to that mission 1 of our recovery plan, I think it would be useful for us outside of this meeting, but maybe bring to a future cabinet, if appropriate, how that is progressing and how the mitigation measures to offset the impact of the overspend, as it's largely drawn from the public health, early years health element, doesn't undermine that systemic sort of early prevention approach around health.
Most definitely, we'll have that meeting out.
Any other questions? No?
Sophie.
Thank you very much. Okay, so can I just draw your attention to the recommendations on big page number 102. So for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is asked to 3.1.1 note the report, the forecast overspend on the general fund and the management actions being taken to mitigate it. 3.1.2 note the forecast positions on the DSG and the HRA, and 3.1.3 note the forecast capital monitoring financial position. Do you agree, Councillor James Asser?
Agreed.
Do you agree, Councillor James Beckles? Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway?
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali?
Agreed.
Councillor Shaban Mohammed?
Agreed.
Councillor Terry Paul?
Agreed.
Mayor Roxana Piaz agrees as well. Right, let's move on to the next agenda item. So this will be formally introduced by Councillor Rohit Dasgupta, and then we have the portfolio lead, Councillor Charlene McLean, joining us via Zoom, who will want to say some words. So over to you, Rohit.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to formally introduce this midterm report of the community assemblies. The first community assemblies in 2018-20 was set up due to the new administration's commitment to improve resident engagement and participation and to build a stronger culture of participative democracy and opening up the council decision-making to put people at the heart of everything we do. This report seeks to provide a midterm update on the current cycle of community assemblies, and members are asked to approve amendments for next year's cycle, 2022-2023. I would like to, at this point, hand over to Corporate Director Jessica Crow and Councillor Charlene McLean, the Cabinet member responsible for community neighbourhoods, for their comments and to provide more detailed information on this report. But just before I do, I would like to comment Councillor McLean for her work on this, and I wanted to share that many residents in Canning Town who have attended these assemblies have told me how much it actually means for them to attend them and to feel part of the decision-making process in the council, and rather than being a top-down approach, feel that their voices are heard. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Charlene.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for those kind words as well, Councillor Dasgupta. So putting people at the heart of everything we do is a key strategic principle for Newham Council. And we are committed to better involving residents because working together with our communities achieves better services and outcomes and makes the borough a happier and healthier place to live. A key manifesto pledge of this administration was for Newham to become a beacon of participatory democracy, of which our community assemblies is an integral part. Just to clarify, the community assemblies must not be confused with the permanent citizens' assemblies, which is one borough-wide assembly where participants are selected by a sortition rather than being an open to all like the community assemblies. So I acknowledge that we are some way off being a beacon and are in the early stage of the journey, but this midterm report for this current cycle, being the second within the borough, sets out where we are on this journey and what has been learned so far. We've listened to feedback from residents about the process and changes have been made, which will be reflected in next year's cycle. The full midterm learning report can be found at Appendix 3, big page number 183. The main takeaway from this was that it was perceived that the process felt rushed at times. This is in contrast to the first cycle, where participants felt the process was too long. We are hopeful that by carrying over the priorities voted on by residents in this second cycle to the third, it will allow more time to be allocated to the other phases. Participants of the first cycle of community assemblies wanted to see the monies available increase, which was also a recommendation of the Independent Democracy and Civic Participation Commission. Therefore, Newham's community assemblies are now one of the country's largest participatory budgeting programmes, with £100,000 worth of seal money available in each of our 8 community neighbourhoods for local people to decide on budget priorities for their areas and then subsequently what projects should be funded. To ensure compliance with seal requirements throughout all stages of the process, community neighbourhood officers worked closely with officers in planning and development. Internal audit examines the governance model and the control structures that were introduced for this cycle to ensure that the model was robust prior to the commencement of this cycle. Key recommendations from internal audit were fed into the final design, and at the end of this cycle, a project management audit will be undertaken, the results of which will be reported to the audit committee. The introduction of the Newham Co-Create digital platform in this second cycle has been a welcome addition to support widening participation. Over 3,600 residents took part in the recent participatory budgeting exercise on the platform in July 2021 and voted on projects that are most important to them. There are now over 80 projects that will be delivered in partnership with local residents, voluntary and community organisations and the council, and a detailed list of these can be found at Appendix 1 from big page number 161 in the report pack. The community assemblies have clearly demonstrated that our communities have a wealth of knowledge, skills and assets, and that residents are well placed to understand what they need to resolve any challenges and to put forward project proposals to enhance their neighbourhoods. Finally, Chair, I would like to extend the gratitude of myself and the team to all the working group members who have dedicated their time and local knowledge, ward councillors and the 8 community neighbourhood teams that facilitated and guided all involved through the different stages. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Charlene. Jessica, would you like to add anything at this stage?
No, I don't think I have anything formal to add, Chair, to that very comprehensive introduction. Something which might be useful for the committee, though, is just some informal feedback from attendants at one of the working groups in the neighbourhood that I'm responsible for, which was took place last night. Just really encouraging to see the progress being made. So all of the projects had begun to one degree or another. Some were quite a long way down the track. They were all fully engaged. They were kind of complying with all of the requirements. That was all very clearly understood. So I think, you know, from that just sort of snapshot of evidence, it's landed well, as the Deputy Mayor says, and is beginning to show progress, and we'll be capturing that as we go forward through the remaining months of the year, so that we can showcase these great community projects and the community spirit that they demonstrate. Thanks. Happy to take questions though on anything in the report, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, colleagues? I've got Councillor Zulfikar Ali and Councillor James Asser.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all thank Rohit and Charlene team for this excellent model of community engagement, which is going to be a beacon of success across the country. So well done to you all for a complete transformation of the culture. There seems to be a buzz out there. People are competing for different projects in different areas. You feel that people think that they are part of the council's infrastructure in terms of improving the local environment. So it's a great achievement. So well done to you all. The only comment or question I have is that clearly there are a number of themes which are emerging from the chosen priorities in different areas. And I just like to make a point that perhaps in the wider sort of mainstreaming of the services, whether we could pick up some of those themes to bring them back into service priorities to see how best we can actually have a collaborative working to make sure that we're complementing what is being done local level and we sustain it. I think that's the critical point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charlene, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just to say, yeah, thank you for that, Sophie. And it's true. It's coming from the people what they want to see. So that's what we should deliver.
Thank you very much, James.
Well, mine was more of a comment, really, and I just thank you for the report. I mean, I think it's been interesting to take part in this, and on a local level as well as through my cabinet portfolio. It's interesting. Lots of the stuff that's come through does relate to my department and kind of environment, which is interesting to see that there is a huge interest in that. And lots of the stuff we've seen, I think, including projects that didn't get voted on, there's things we can pick up on and use around the borough. There's some really brilliant ideas that actually would work in other places. The point made about community involvement that Councillor Ali just made, a lot of this stuff works best if the community adopt it and look after it and engaged in it. We've seen from some of the other projects in my area, and I think some useful lessons coming out of that in terms of wider council project stuff. And we've certainly seen on my local level things that we could perhaps improve on in the next cycle, which I'm sure everyone else has, but I think it's worked very well. It's been interesting, and I think there's some useful learning for across the council we can pick up. So certainly it's been an interesting project that I think will help us in future.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anything that you'd like to say in response to that comment, Councillor colleague Charlene McLean?
No, just thank you for your feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can't see any other questions or hands raised. Oh, I have now. Councillor Sarah Ruiz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I just think that it's been a far more interactive experience than we've ever had before. Charlene knows exactly my feelings about it. I love the shopping basket experience. I think that there are lessons that we have learnt going into the next phase. And I think that certainly in Custom House and Canning Town, we need to look more carefully at how we support individual residents to put in applications. I think for them, it was all a bit too rushed. So I look forward to working with residents in the next tranche of money, because I think they've got some really good ideas. I just think that they didn't quite know how to put their thoughts on paper. So, but yeah, I think it's been a far better experience than I thought it would be. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm assuming once all of these amazing ideas and a demonstration of the council people collaboration materialise and manifest, they'll all be labelled people power. To that effect.
there was a question at the working group, Chair, about what the hashtag should be, so we can suggest that. Yeah.
It's just a small suggestion. And can I just use this opportunity to also thank Councillor Charlene McLean and actually the wider team that have been tasked with advancing this from when we stepped in back in May 2018 with a particular expression of deep thanks and gratitude to Officer Mohammed, who's with us, because he's really motored and advanced this through encouraging and incentivising his community neighbourhoods team to learn something new, and it's been no mean feat, and I very much genuinely appreciate it, Mohammed, so thank you very much. Do you want to say anything?
No, just thank you, Chair.
Oh, I've embarrassed him now.
Yeah,
right, okay.
Cheers.
So, no, pleasure. Thank you very much once again. So, colleagues, can I just draw your attention to the recommendations, big page number 148. So can we just go round and hopefully everyone agrees. Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles. Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway. Agreed. Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Shaban Mohammed.
Agreed.
And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees. Thank you very much. Now we're going to be going on to agenda item 10, and this is the future leisure management options. Can I just advise colleagues that there is an exempt appendix for this item at the back of the pack, and if any member wishes to raise a matter pertaining to that exempt appendix, then I am going to need to close public and press access, and we will have to do answer that question or pose that question and answer that question in private session. So please be mindful of the exempt appendix. But for now, I will invite Councillor Zulfikar Ali to introduce the paper and then pass on to relevant officer colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. And I have Colin, Jason and Carly here to answer any detailed question that members may have. First of all, thank you, Chair. And this report presents future leisure management options and put forward a number of recommendations for Cabinet's consideration. Colleagues, as you all know, health and well-being of our residents has been one of the top priorities of this administration. We are well aware of the physical and mental health issues facing our communities. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic and the lockdown has had even greater impact, and particularly the disproportionate impact in our borough. During the last few years, we have embarked upon a number of initiatives as part of our corporate policies. And I can say safely, Chair, that we should be proud to say that we have put health and well-being of our residents as a top priority for the council. And this has given our residents a sense of comfort and assurance, as many residents are actually taking part in so many different initiatives that we have started. Our 50 steps, our health and well-being strategy, putting our residents at the heart of everything we do, their happiness, and our approach to community wealth building, and many other individual initiatives demonstrate our efforts and seriousness to improve health and well-being of our residents. These efforts are moving in the right direction. And as I said earlier, a lot of people are actually engaging with ourselves. May I also say, Chair, that our efforts have been recognized nationally by the government, and indeed by many other local authorities who are now seeing us as a beacon of success and are following our approach. In this wider policy context, the Council's leisure management strategies play an important role in supporting our residents to be physically and mentally active and to address health inequalities that we are facing. We have leisure centres, parks and open spaces which provide excellent opportunities for physical activity. However, our current contract with Active Newham, which includes management of the Council's leisure centres, allotment sites, new volunteers, community sports development, and pitch and event booking in parks, was implemented back in January 2013 and is due to expire on 31st of December 2022. As you would appreciate, this is an historic contractual arrangement agreed way back in 2013 and is no longer fit for purpose to meet our needs and aspirations. As the existing contract is expiring, this presents us with an opportunity to review the arrangements to meet current and future challenges. And can I also say that our officers have worked extremely hard despite COVID difficulties, and I'm grateful to them for all their open and objective approach in evaluating this. Can I say, Chair, that this comprehensive and fundamental review of services has been undertaken to ensure future leisure management arrangements are realigned to the Council's core strategies and with our aspirations with regard to 50 steps and all other strategies, including community wealth building and our Brighter Future work, which provides an opportunity for our young children to thrive, as we heard earlier in the conversation we just had about another report. And finally, Chairs, we are recommending future service plans which best deliver our policies and aspirations, as I said, and this is through insourcing sub-element of services which best fit in within the existing structure that we have. We also, and that includes volunteering services, allotment and parks booking service. And as part of this recommendation, we are also proposing that we seek procurement of the leisure management contract. And if agreed this evening, we will be presenting a further report to the Cabinet on the procurement of the leisure management element of this contract in due course. So that is all from me, Chair. I'll ask Colin, Jason or Carly if they wish to add anything.
Good evening, everybody. Colin Ansell, Corporate Director for Adults and Health. Just very quickly, really comprehensive from Councillor Raleigh. I just want to add, as Councillor Raleigh alluded to at the end of his presentation there, that the pre-procurement report for the specification to tender the leisure services will be coming back to Cabinet in due course in January, and that will be presented at that point. I don't know if Jason wanted to add anything further.
Nothing to add, thanks.
Okay. Carly, would you like to say anything?
Carly, no.
No. Okay.
No, sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, colleagues? Nope. Right. Okay. Can I just personally, in a similar vein to the community assemblies, just commend you, Zulfikar, and the wider team, Colin, Jason, and Carly, for the Herculean and fantastic efforts and time and thought that you've put into this piece, because it's going to be so fundamental to the health and wellbeing transformation we want to see in this borough for all of our residents as part of our 50 steps for a healthier Newham, but also as part of that core mission that is hardwired into our recovery plans under the auspices of Towards a Better Newham, and that mission pertaining to the health, wellbeing and happiness of our residents. So thank you very, very much indeed. So can I just draw everyone's attention to recommendations as set out on big page number 196 of the printed agenda pack. And I'm going to ask members of the Cabinet only in the room if they agree. So Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles. Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Carly Parkway.
Agreed.
Councillor Shabbar Mohammed.
Agreed.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed too.
And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees. Thank you very much. We're now going to be going on to agenda item 11. And I'm the portfolio lead for this, so I'll say some introductory remarks, and I would like to invite thereafter the Corporate Director, Dave Hughes, but the report author, Ellie Cooper-Thomas, who's done a huge amount of work on this, and I'm particularly excited about this piece, despite the fact that I've provided her some real anxiety over recent weeks with my slowness in providing feedback. So thank you very much for your patience, Ellie. So colleagues, this is a report that seeks agreement from Cabinet to approve the first engagement method and process or phase of our local plan refresh. As you'll all recall, back in December 2018, we approved at that stage, not long after we stepped into office, the Newham local plan, which is a really fundamental document for any local authority and place. And that was the conclusion of what in essence was a 5-year process that commenced under the previous administration. We knew that there were limitations to that local plan, not least in relation and as it pertained to our own ambitious housing delivery intentions, but also we knew and we were aware that the wider London plan process of being reviewed, and we needed to make sure that any local plan that we adopt here in Newham was reflective of any changes in the wider London plan. This local plan refresh and what is set in this report in terms of the community engagement piece. And there are two components of this paper, just to advise. One is issues and options, and then there's a statement of community involvement. And as mentioned, the local plan is a really fundamental document for any local authority and any place. It enables you to both be ambitious in your vision, but it also enables you to respond to all of the spatial requirements and economic requirements and strategic requirements that a local authority has set out. So in the context of Newham, our strategic intent relating to tackling the climate emergency, we've set out our bold ambition to create sustainable 15-minute neighbourhoods that enable walking and cycling, but also ensuring as we adapt to the changing nature of work and the way in which people live their lives, their ability to be able to access their core essentials within a 15-minute walk or cycle. Our intentions around genuine affordable homes are of high quality and high design and contribute to our sustainability and climate emergency requirements, making sure that we have spaces across our borough and facilities that welcome and nurture our children and young people. We've set out very clearly that we want Newham to become the best place in the world for a child and young person to grow up, and the physical aspects of a place are as important as all the emotional support that we provide through service provision, and how we design our neighbourhoods and homes in a way that's fit for purpose for the 21st century, in ways that enable the promotion of clean neighbourhoods and healthy neighbourhoods, where, you know, the design and the infrastructure and the physicality of our neighbourhoods doesn't lend itself to people thinking it's okay to throw rubbish on our streets, and also how we enable the incubation and the growth of businesses that will create the jobs, both jobs required now but also jobs of the future. So, Cabinet, you're going to be asked to agree an updated, an issues and options paper that will form the basis of our conversations with residents, and an updated statement of community involvement, which will set out how we will go about doing it. And I'm very, very excited about I'm very excited about the opportunity that this will afford to all manner of residents, young and old, from different communities, faith communities, different ethnic communities, to be able to be intimately involved in something that's so fundamental and important. And, you know, following on from today's decision, there will be a animated and exciting engagement and involvement process and promotion with all of our residents with regards to this important process. At this juncture, I'm going to invite Dave Hughes or Ellie to contribute.
Thank you, Mayor. It's Dave Hughes, Corporate Director of Inclusive Economy and Housing. I'll just say a few words and then hand over to Ellie. As the Mayor says, a local plan is always one of the most important documents that a council produces, or strategies a council produces. However, what's particularly important about this document is it's going to be the document that actually supports the borough's recovery and also shapes how the borough develops into the future to meet the challenges of the climate emergency. So officers particularly are excited about this local plan. Having been involved with 6 local plans over my career, this is the most exciting plan I've been involved with. And whilst we've got some fantastic officers working at the borough, this plan's only going to be successful if we fully manage to engage with our residents and our communities in actually what goes into the plan. So at that point, I'll hand over to Ellie, who's the one that's particularly excited and enthusiastic about engaging with our residents and community. Thank you, Ellie.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, just Mayor Fiaz, you've given a really comprehensive introduction to why the local plan is so important and all the things it's going to cover. My ask really is for Cabinet councillors here this evening, and also to wider councillors, is to really help us get the message out to residents that you talk to. I'm sure there are residents who come to you in your surgeries and through other forums who raise issues which fundamentally we can only resolve through changing planning policies and making them fit for purpose and fit for residents' lives. So we'll be contacting you after this meeting and after the details of how we're going to be engaging all of our residents, and we'd really appreciate all the help and input you can provide in getting the message out through various channels that we know that you have access to. And also please do join us at some of these events, and we'll be letting you know about when they're going to take place after this.
Super, thank you very much, Ellie. Any questions, colleagues? No? Oh, James Asser.
Well, it's more of a comment, so I'm full of comments rather than questions this evening. But you touched on a part of this. You mentioned kind of 15-minute neighbourhoods, and a lot of the work my area is doing, I think, links into this quite importantly. And I think the thing about that is politics and policy have changed very, very rapidly in a very short space of time, and will continue to do so. The landscape, not just locally but nationally, is very different now to it was when we were all elected 3 years ago, and will be different again year by year, particularly coming out of the COP conference this year and further developments. So this is hugely important just in terms of keeping up to speed. And I think as Dave has made clear, there's lots of exciting opportunities within that. I was speaking to just some residents yesterday who said, some of the changes we've made have made them have to change the way they kind of use the local community, but actually are seeing the benefits of it to their kids. And so I think, interestingly, people are starting to have a think about this and get engaged with it. And I think this opportunity will allow people to do a lot more of that as well.
Just about to say few. God, right, okay, that's really nice to hear. Colleen.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I have a question just in relation to how will this be different from the previous approaches from Council?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to pass this over to Ellie, albeit I appreciate, Ellie, you weren't here previously. I mean, from my perspective, the scale and the scale of our approach in terms of community involvement genuinely in line with our wider participatory democracy ambitions and agenda is very much a distinct feature of this approach in a way that wasn't demonstrable previously. And, just really echoing what Ellie said about the important role that all councillors, not just members of the Cabinet and wider executive, have to play in encouraging as many to encourage residents. And I think it is significant and very different because of just the changing nature of our lives and our experience, and the point that Dave Hughes made, that this is fundamental to our recovery ambitions and actually how we conceptualise space and Newham as a borough as we progress in the 21st century and everything that entails. And I think that's hugely exciting. And I think it denotes and it is framed by a vision for the borough that wasn't, arguably I would of course say those, isn't as ambitious or is more ambitious and exacting and demanding than the previous frame that was applied. Is there anything, Ellie or Dave, you'd like to add to that? And then I'll come to Councillor Zulfikar Ali and then Councillor Sarah Ruiz. No? Okay. Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really, in terms of what's the difference. I mean, I recall when we were elected, I think the last local plan had to be approved literally soon after we were elected, and there were some concerns and issues in terms of how that plan had been perceived by public at large and whether that reflected the policies and the need of the communities. And as such, it was agreed on the proviso that this would be reviewed, and I'm pleased to hear that review has now almost materialized, and we are progressing this further to make sure that we have it adopted, and that will give communities some degree of comfort and confidence that actually we have listened to them, and we are taking into account the local needs. So well done to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just picking up on that point, I mean, specifically, this involvement process and the approach very much acknowledges and recognises that as the most diverse borough anywhere in the country, we are a community made up of a spectrum of faiths and different, communities, of ethnic communities, and, what that requires in terms of their community infrastructure, be that places of worship, which were designated as being out of town as opposed to being central to people's lives. If you think about the process of faith practice, but also the way in which we need to understand how space and place is used in different ways by communities from different cultural backgrounds. So I'm really excited about those innovations that have been introduced. Councillor Sarah Ruiz.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to say that, it's just a fundamental change as to how it was done before. That last time, I believe it was very much a tick box exercise there was really no encouragement from the community. You know, it's not a subject that everybody warms to, let's be honest, but actually with the right environment and the right encouragement, people do have a lot to say about it, but they need to be encouraged to say it. And I think that's what's so totally different this time round, is actually the feeling is that we want to engage with you. Not that, oh, well, it would be nice to engage with you, but we can't be bothered to find a way to do it. So, you know, I think that it's a much, much more inclusive approach this time. And yeah, it's really exciting. You know, 15-minute neighbourhoods can make a huge difference to communities, certainly south of the A13.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. And on that note, I will draw everyone's attention to the opening sentence of the Cabinet paper. The report reflects a process of fundamental importance and is a call to action to get involved and help shape Newham's future as a borough and as a place together through the development of our new local plan. And on that note, can I draw all members of the Cabinet who are present in this room to the recommendations as set out on big page number 211, and I'm going to ask if you agree. So Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles. Agreed. Councillor Carly Lee Parkway.
Agreed and noted.
Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Shaban Mohammed.
Agreed, Chair.
And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees. Okay, now we're going to be coming on to our penultimate agenda item, which is agenda item 12, and this is the Royal Docks Corridor Stage 3 approval. I'm passing over to Councillor James Asser, and then please do introduce officers as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. As will be clear from the title, because it says stage 3 approvals, this is something we have looked at in Cabinet before, but it's worth a refresher for everyone, particularly those public tuning in, that this is a stage in a bigger scheme, which is about the regeneration and improvement of the Royal Docks corridors. That's the stretch of road, North Woolwich Road and Silvertown Way, that runs between Canning Town Station up towards the airport on the beginning of the Connaught Bridge. It's an area which was designed and built back in the day when it was very industrial and still part of supporting the docks when they were operating, but that area has changed hugely with large amounts of residential development. There is still an industrial element, no less Tate and Lyle, of course, but there's been lots of changes needed, and we've had lots of requests and lots of feedback from residents over time about the speed of vehicles and the nature of the road around there. And this is another phase in part of a very larger development that fits in with the wider development that the Royal Docks Enterprise Zone is bringing there. So this is aiming to draw down over £1 million worth of Section 106 money, and specifically this stage of the scheme is to make improvements along the stretch of the road in terms of bus priority and cycling improvements, which overall will be part of a bigger scheme, which will do public realm improvements too, including more greenery, better planting, better access to the stations and linking up of those. And with a new secondary school coming along that stretch in the new year, it's obviously important that we do some work now. We've consulted with local residents. There's been lots of feedback on that, very positive responses from people about improving, because people have been keen to see it move from that kind of industrial feel to something that is much more of a neighbourhood, which fits in with some of the conversations around the local plan. But also we've seen a lot of increase in cycling down there, not least from people cycling to work, and making that safer too is hugely important, as well as making it safer for kids when they go to the school. So this is another phase in that wider development package, and I think will be welcomed and will improve the area and help build on what is a growing community.
Thank you very much. Would you like any officers?
I think I've got Murray and Jamie, and Murray is probably the lead on the detail on this. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I think you've covered everything very well, Councillor Ash. I think the only thing that I would reiterate is just how desperate this scheme is wanted by the residents in the area, who are desperate for a change to their very industrial kind of environment that they are living in at the moment. But also how important it is to the statement it makes about the enterprise zone. It is the key corridor that brings us to this, worldwide important enterprise zone of development and regeneration. and at the moment it's not sending the correct message about that area and that regeneration, and it desperately needs desperate improvement. Hence the rather large price tag that comes along with this project, but it is a very long and large scoped project, which is transformational in its nature. So I think that's all I would add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Murray. And similarly, just wanted to thank you for all of your hard work on this, because I know it's not been pain-free. Nothing, kids.
Never is.
I was just about to say. Right, are there any questions, colleagues? Right, I've got Councillor Rohit Dasgupta and then Carleen McLean. Sorry, Carleen, not McLean. Carleen.
Hybrid.
I'll come to you. I'm so sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain moment.
Thank you so much. This is a very welcome paper, and I would like to commend the Environment and Sustainable Transport team for this. I'm especially happy that the corridor scheme will be delivered in 9 phases, which includes my ward, Canning Town South. Can I just ask Councillor Asser to confirm if improvements will include looking at issues around pedestrian crossing, and especially the severe waterlogging that my residents in Canning Town face outside this Canning Town station, also commonly known as Rohit's Puddle. But as Councillor Asser is aware, I have been raising this from before I was even elected, and it does remain a very important issue.
Yes, I mean, I come back on. I was calling it Rohit's Lake, but if you want to downgrade to a puddle, that's fine. I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things this will do is pick up and be able to deal with a lot of long-standing problems. I'm aware that, particularly around Canning Town Station, there's been a waterlogging problem, which is obviously really important. Crossing points is going to be part of this, because until we started this scheme, I think there was about 2 crossing points along the whole stretch outside a couple of stations, and there is a lot of dashing across the road simply because there aren't enough crossing points. So crossing points is part of that, because one of the things we look at is the access between the existing stations and the new build housing and existing, so creating new access points is important. But I think, yes, we will certainly be wanting to pick up and resolve long-standing issues, and officers will have heard your comments about your puddle or your minor lake, and I think Murray will certainly be well aware of the problems we've had outside Canning Town Station that we can pick up as part of major works, because often, as you know, the south of the borough is a lot of marshland, which does bring these problems with it and doesn't require extra engineering works, but doing that at the same time as the bigger scheme is something we can pick up and hopefully resolve permanently.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's who you are.
Thank you, Councillor. So just reading through your cabinet paper, in 4.1 you speak about the changes in regards to trees, greening in the area, and so on and so forth. And it's not really a question, I guess. Obviously, by reading this, I get the sense that this will be a safer, more cleaner environment for residents to walk down and commuters as such. I guess I just wonder, in regards to the bigger issues along that roadway going up towards City Airport, that there was a lot of dust collected there. There's a lot of noise pollution. And obviously those lorries that use that highway are obviously there going to businesses that have been in situ for a very long time. I just wondered, in regards to the trees and the provisions that are going to be put in regards to the greening, and maybe it's a silly question, but I think I need to ask it in relation to how many years will we get the benefits of that greening?
Okay, I'll take that in bits. So, I mean, in the moment, there is some of the new developments have had planting. There is sections of it which are quite grown, but a lot of that is self-set and actually doesn't feel particularly safe because it's grown up in a way where you've got a lot of shrubbery and a lot of trees, and it blocks out the light, which does need improvements. There are other bits which haven't been planted at all. So this gives us the opportunity to kind of clear out the bits that don't feel safe, but do more planting and actually plant it in a way that is maintainable, but kind of helps with the general climate. I think in terms of kind of safety, there are bits of the road that are well used walking, particularly between Pontoon Dock and West Silvertown, which used other bits which are so derelict, that they aren't walked in the same way, and we want to improve those and generally make the whole thing easier to use and more pedestrian friendly. And you know, with the growth of Royal Victoria Dock, you know, it's become a tourist destination, not least for use of the cable car, but all the water sports that built up. And with City Hall arriving, there's going to be a lot more inbound traffic. So doing that and making it safe and people feel they can walk to and from City Hall is going to be an important part of that. You pick up the point around the dust, which is, I know, something I'm aware of as someone who is local to the area. I know Strategic Development Committee have already picked this up and addressed some of this, and I think we've seen some improvements. I've been down there with officers, and I know Jamie Cook, the Director of Highways, is on. He's been looked for himself. So we are working with the Environment Agency and the companies down there. Obviously, there is a clash of existences, because obviously new housing is built up in what has been long-standing industrial areas, and we need to meet some of that. Some of that land is reserved for industrial work, but those industries need to kind of live with their new neighbours as well and make sure they're meeting all the criteria, because at the moment there is a serious problem we have to get on top of, but officers are looking at that, and we're working with the Environment Agency. I don't know if Jamie wants to add anything on that particular point, because I know that is of concern to residents in Royal Docks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So I will. I've been to visit the site as well, and as you say, there are numerous issues of very frequent and high volume of HGV movements with consequential damage to the road surface that we've had to look into because it was becoming a little bit unsafe. So we looked into that, and also the dust and lack of cleanliness created by those industrial uses. So we are going to have a meeting on site in the next couple of weeks with colleagues from the Environment Agency and Public Realm as well, to look at what we can do in terms of the cleansing, but also to assess if those businesses are operating within the terms of their licenses, and what we can do in partnership with them to improve that situation, because it is, as you say, very dusty in that area with an awful lot of vehicle movements.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions? I've got Councillor Rohit just got to... Just
a very small typo on page 483. Wards affected, it should say Canning Town South and not Canning Town North.
You are right. Apologies. I meant to spot that.
Sorry for that, Councillor. That's inexcusable. I do apologise. We trust me, we do know where the scheme is, I promise.
All right. We'll just make sure that's picked up for the purposes of any minutes. So can I just draw everyone's attention to the recommendations on big page number 484 going into 485. Councillor Shabbar Mohammed, do you agree? Agreed. Councillor Zulfikar Ali?
Agreed, Chair.
I don't know why you're laughing.
If you'll get a name right, that's why.
The giggles. Is it just the authoritative way in which I looked at Councillor Shabbar Mohammed? Anyway, right, let's, I'm digressing. Sorry, Zulfikar. Councillor.
Agreed, Chair.
Yeah, agreed. Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Carly. Agreed, Chair.
I agree.
Thank you very much. And Councillor James Beckles. And then, you've said yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. And Mayor Roxana Fiaz agrees as well. Apologies, Clerk and colleagues. We've clearly got the fit of Beckles. Right, so let's move on to the final agenda item, which is agenda item 13, and this is improving borough cleanliness, which is something that we're all focused on as an administration. Over to you, Councillor James Beckles.
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues, I want to introduce this paper for a pilot enhanced enforcement contract. This is an important step in our ability to combat littering. We have a track record of being innovative in tackling flight tipping in our borough, from our work with Keepers and Tidy, led by my colleague, the Cabinet Member for Environment, Highways and Sustainable Transport. We have worked to change the behaviour of our residents through education and proactive measures, which have both informed and engaged our residents about the cost and consequences of fly tipping. The pilot for an enhanced enforcement contract is not intended to be punitive or penalise our residents. However, we must take a zero tolerance approach to littering, which has a detrimental impact on the look and feel of our streets and public spaces. For me, it's the negative perception of the cleanliness of our public realm that we must challenge, and the reality of littering and rubbish, which we have to actively address. The contract will complement the work already underway in the wider directorate with Keep Britain Tidy on behavioural change and fulfil pillars 2 and 5 of our Towards a Better Newham strategy. The pilot will provide us with additional resources to enforce on those who litter and commit other environmental crimes in our borough. We will continue to educate, but we will also enforce. It's also the responsibility of our residents and visitors to our borough to keep Newham tidy. As a local authority, we have a responsibility to clean up the streets, but the onus alone cannot and should not fall solely on the authority, but should be joined up and should be everyone's responsibility. Members and residents at home, be under no illusion that this pilot is designed to tackle with a robust response to environmental crime. This will send a clear message that littering is unacceptable in our borough. It is antisocial and those caught littering will be fined. We are taking a zero tolerance approach to this type of behaviour. Those who litter go against our shared values of community and respect for our environment. Our residents want to live, work and enjoy their borough unhindered by litter and rubbish. Residents have told us through surveys and our community assemblies that cleanliness of the borough is a priority for them, and this paper sets out our commitment to deliver on a cleaner, greener Newham. We have set out in the paper the details. The contract will run for 18 months and run on a cost-neutral basis. Any revenue generated will be utilised to deliver activities that support a cleaner and greener borough. Gary Connors, the Assistant Director for Community Safety, is on hand to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Gary, would you like to add anything?
Good evening, Mayor. No, thank you. I think Councillor Beckles has covered it quite comprehensively.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, do we have any questions? I've got Councillor Terry Paul and then Councillor Zulfikar Ali, followed by Councillor Carlini Parkway. I've seen Councillor Sarah Ruiz and also Councillor Asa, and I'm just checking to see if there's anyone else. No, right, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Beckles and officers for this pilot, which is really welcome. Just to ask a question, it says it's a targeted pilot, but in terms of location, is that the whole of Newham or is it specific areas?
It's specific. Gary. Gareth.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we're looking at the moment. We've got a number of hotspot areas in the borough which we want to be looking to target, ideally, and we'll look to. Ideally, the contract itself is to supplement our officers that are already out there doing this work. We already target some of our hotspot areas, so we will look to push this service towards our key areas of littering across the borough. But we're also outside of this, and you will see from work we're doing going forward, working closely with Councillor Astor as well. We're also working on pilots internally to work with our enforcement officers supporting our cleansing colleagues to target other areas. So yes, we will constantly review and look at targeted areas.
Thank you very much. Is that okay? Yeah, go on.
So I'm just thinking, if you're a resident listening in on this, which is on this fantastic initiative, they'll be going, is it going to be in my patch? So is it going to be in high footfall areas? And I speak as a Stratford councillor, put it out there. Is it Stratford? Is it Green Street? There are parts of the borough which are high footfall. I'm just thinking for a resident, you know, this is like a good pilot. Is it, you know, are they going to see some of this? If you know what I mean, Gary.
Understood, Councillor, and apologies for the response. Understood completely. Initially, Councillor, yes, it will hit our main thoroughfares you mentioned, some of our main routes, which we're focused on already with our work with our cleansing colleagues. But essentially, we will look to constantly review this, and if that turns out to be quieter, more residential areas, we will target those as well. So we will constantly move this around. But initially, absolutely, we will look at our main thoroughfares, those streets and areas that we get picked up fairly regularly.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Zulfikar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Beckles. It's a great initiative, and I wish you very well in terms of this pilot that we're going on board now. My question really is, I mean, we do have existing enforcement resources, Gary, and how is this going to complement the existing resources, and how are we going to prioritize in terms of contractual arrangements, what this contractor will be doing or what we will be doing. But secondly, there is a reference in the report about the education program that it will work in tandem with enforcement. How is that going to be built into the process? And the third one, which is a slight worry really, that often companies who come forward on cost neutral basis depend on us for sufficient enforcement and legal resources to back up enforcement. I just need some assurance that we do have sufficient legal support available to any FPN which need to be taken to court, but we don't actually fall on simply because we don't have the legal provision and the contractor cannot progress the cases which he or she would like to, simply putting passing the back to us. So what assurances can we get on that regard?
Understood, Councillor. Thank you for your questions. On the existing resources question, Councillor, I think essentially why we're looking for this contract and this pilot. And again, we'll review this across the 18 months, as Councillor Beckles has mentioned, to see the success and see where we've gone when we link it in with the education piece, which I'll come to in a moment. But if I'm honest, I think we've restructured our community safety services to focus on those issues the communities tell us about, some of those ASB, those ingrained antisocial behaviour, specific geographic problems, and we focus our officers there. And if honest, I think we've done that to a point where we have less proactive patrols on the streets, I guess. We've targeted our resources more towards what residents are telling us. And ultimately, I think that this is a support contract to support that work, to get out and get that visible presence again. So whilst we're dealing with the issues that we currently deal with, and as you quite rightly said, we have existing resources to do this work, this is an extra resource that will actually be out in our streets, visible and tackling some of those issues that are happening day to day, rather than waiting for us for a response. And again, they can reply or respond back, or sorry, report back to our services where we can pick up the further investigation on those as well. So it's an additional resource in that sense to be extra boots on the street, I guess. On the education piece, Councillor, there's a wider piece, and apologies if the wording doesn't explain it this way. There's a whole piece of work we're doing with our communications colleagues, my colleagues in the cross-public realm, where we're looking to do that wider education piece. We've seen before, we've done undertaken projects where we've looked at the CSI tape essentially to try and explain to people that, you know, what the issues are around this. We're visiting more residents, getting more roadshows and workshop out there, working closely between Councillor Beckles and Councillor Asser to explain to people what this littering does, the impact and the blight it has on the community. And then followed up by the enforcement side. But we're also looking at a huge communications piece on this. We'll go forward over the next couple of weeks and continue across the rest of the year on this. So there's an additional piece where we're drawing into our specification for this contract when we go out to procurement on this, where we're looking for companies who've worked closely with previous authorities around their education piece as well. So we can also look to expect the successful contractor to come with some education piece on this as well, and that will be looking to both work across our schools, work with young people, but also continuously survey residents and just ensure that that this service is engaging with residents. The last piece I'll come to, Councillor, and you're absolutely right. Built into the specification is an expectation that any such external company will come in and they will go almost from beginning to end on the judicial process, as much as giving out the FPNs, chasing off FPNs and looking to do all of their own administration around these. But absolutely, there may well be some fallout for my service on continuing to do some of the legal cases. We have some of that now anyway. We negotiate with our legal colleagues to make sure we bring the right cases forward. What I think we will just need to keep an eye on is what kind of cases and what the level of cases that leaves us with that we might have to enforce as a service. But also, as Councillor Beckles has mentioned, the idea of this contract is to be let on a shared revenue basis, and the money that we would look to achieve through the authority on the back of this would we look to put back in both to potentially to more enforcement officers within the service, but also to look at some legal capacity there as well.
If I may very quickly come back to you, that's really helpful, Gary. Thank you for that. I'd just like to know how we can assess the success of this pilot and whether we could expect an interim report back in 6 months or so to see how things are going on.
Absolutely, Councillor. We'll report back on a regular basis, and Councillor Beckles has given me the chance to make sure we do that, working closely with Councillor Asser and colleagues in cleansing as well. We'll certainly assess. We've set out in the specification what we expect in terms of positive payment on FPNs, so we'll be looking to draw up the contract on that basis. Also, we will not be setting a target for FPNs. That's not what this is about. This is about looking at the borough cleanliness, and it will tie into a wider piece of work we're looking at about customer satisfaction, what our residents think, getting surveys back, and essentially, and just looking at the cleanliness of our streets and how we look to review that as we go forward again with cleansing colleagues. But absolutely, Councillor, we will come back with interim reports.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Councillor James Beckles, to that response? Are you okay? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Colleen Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I have a comment, maybe there is a question somewhere in this, but I'm just going to say what I've got to say. I think, let's be clear, we're all residents here in Newham. This is the place we call home, this is the place we love, this is the place that we decided to stand and be elected for. And I don't think that there's any resident in this borough that doesn't want to live in a clean environment. I most certainly know that I want to live in a clean environment, and I most certainly know that my neighbours want to live in a clean environment, and those of my family. I just want to draw your attention to the report in 3.10, which talks about our young people through the Next Gen Newham work, where they speak about wanting to live in a clean and safe environment. And actually, it's incumbent on all of us to ensure that we have clean environments. It's everybody's business. And it blights, our streets are blighted with broken glass, with rubbish, with dog fouling. And it's unacceptable. I'm trying to think about the words which I use, but it's unacceptable. And I say this, I've spoken to residents in our borough that have children that walk to, and we encourage walking, we encourage cycling, we encourage sustainable ways to travel, but yet our streets are untidy and unsafe. And when I say unsafe, I'm talking about the broken glass on the ground where a child might fall, injuring themselves. It's unacceptable. And so I guess my point really is that as a community, as a borough of residents, of people, of businesses, that it should be everybody's business to try and ensure that our roads and walkways are clean. It literally drives me insane, because it's not just the responsibility of the local authority. And there may be things here where people say, well, you're just going to issue fixed term penalty notice to all those that have done X, Y, or Z or haven't. But I know in the document, now my computer's shut down, I know in the document there's a paragraph which says that actually, even though fly tipping and litter has gone up, the actual fines have decreased. So maybe there could be the issue. But actually, I think that it's incumbent on us, me as well as anybody else, that if I drop litter, I should be fined because I should have picked it up. Like anywhere else around this country, many places adopt this way, no different to you park on a yellow line or you park on a zigzag line in front of a school, you receive a fine, whether we like it or not. Sometimes things happen, I appreciate that, but it's incumbent on us that we keep our environments clean and tidy, because actually it's what we need. For those residents in our borough that are elderly, that have limited mobility, this is so important to enable them to be able to walk around safely. Keeping a clean environment is something that we should all be part of. There wasn't a question in that.
No, and to that comment, I would always emphasise that we've done everything that we can to educate and also to encourage. And I think the third part, that E, is now the enforcement. So where we've encouraged and we've educated and we've had the programmes, we need to enforce, and we need to enforce upon those who are putting the rubbish out on the streets, who are littering. Not to be punitive, but to say this is unacceptable. This is the kind of behaviour that we find unappealing. And it also ties in with our commitments as from the manifesto, but also within the Towards a Better Newham strategy of the pillars 2 and 5 about having a cleaner, greener borough and doing that which affects the well-being and health of our residents. So I think this programme can help towards that. It's not going to eradicate it to zero, unfortunately, but it is a way of getting back on track and saying we've got 3 E's: encouragement, education, and enforcement.
Thank you very much, James. And
sorry, Chair. I just want to come back on that, if you don't mind, Councillor Beckles. You spoke about education. Could you just give us an example of what that looks like, and how we've tried to educate our residents?
Well, part of that sits in my service, but it's the Keep Britain Tidy programme that we've started, from the CSI tape to the stencils on the floor, telling residents how much it costs to pick up rubbish. It costs £3 million a year. We've done those education programs, and we've done with posters as well. Not to mention, it's been in the newspaper, and we've won an award for doing that. And it's been recognised that we have taken a national step, and we've been innovative there. That's been part of the education and the encouragement. We haven't been punitive. We've actually said to residents, don't litter here, and it's moved on. And we've had a successful, statistics will show we've had a 67% decrease in fly tipping where the Keep Britain Tidy pilot has been deployed. And what unfortunately has happened now is that we do have high volume. To tackle that, to tackle those people who are persistent litterers, we now have this contract once agreed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sarah Ruiz.
Thank you, Chair. And I mean, I think that we need to distinguish the difference between littering and fly tipping. So in my view, littering is far more of a blight in this borough than fly tipping. So whilst I fully accept and understand why we are targeting the high footfall areas, and I'm assuming that will include the myriad of fast food outlets, certainly here in Forest Gate, that don't seem to understand the meaning of bins or anything like that. And what happens is that they seed all these chicken boxes over the street, so people then just drop more and more litter. I think, and I think we discussed earlier today, of course, the very people who will be who challenge us about the litter will also be probably the ones who may well be on the receiving end of a fine. So whilst I understand the need to do it, we do need to understand that this won't please everyone. But the point I was wanting to make is that once we've done the heavy footfall areas, then I genuinely think we need to look at how we stop the littering in our side roads. So, and I would go as far as to say, you can always tell when the bin lorries, or whatever they're called, refuse collections have happened, because you can actually follow the trail of debris down the road. So we also, if we're going to be asking our residents to stop littering, we've got to re-educate our workforce as well. And I know that they have a very hard job, and I'm not underestimating it, but if they are dropping litter in the middle of the road, that litter then gets windswept into the gutters, etc., etc. And I look forward to a time when our new in-house cleansing service really begins to buy into that, because I think that we can't just have this pilot where we have enforcement on littering. We also need to ensure that we have a much more robust cleaning program for our side roads. I know it's not easy, but actually that also gives the impression that this borough is not fit for purpose. So I think it's not just this pilot on its own. It's actually the whole business around street cleaning. And I think it'll be, we do need to do something about it. And it's, I just in Forest Gate this afternoon, by the time you'd walked through the dropped beer cans and stuff like that, because, we also have an issue with street drinking, and that also creates more rubbish on the street. So it's a concerted effort all round. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ruiz. Is there anything you'd like to say in response to that?
No, I just want to thank Councillor Ruiz for her comments, and that's something that myself and Gary and James as well, and Jamie Blake will take away and review and look at and bring back results, hopefully.
I think there's also something just on reflection with what Sarah said about the side streets and residential areas. Actually, how do we cultivate and mobilise communities in those side streets and in those residential streets to be part of the movement to keep the borough clean? You know, I noted a couple of weeks back, one of my neighbours, I don't know which one, but thought it was okay to dump an old bedroom side table, and it was just left by the curbside for 2 days before, you know, and I did a bit of a social experiment to see if any of my neighbours would pick it up or report it via the app. Clearly no one did. I subsequently did. So clear, you know, and that points in my mind to, you know, what communities and residents in localities and in streets need to also be doing, you know. And I was out in Manor Park last Friday with Gary and with Bo from the Environment's Director of Environment, and there's a side street that we went into and it's absolutely appalling. And this is a street that, you know, it's dead end, but this is a street that people live in, and clearly they've become so normatised to it and they've switched off because for whatever reason they don't think it's either their responsibility to be part of improving it, or possibly they don't know what to do or where to go. But, you know, that's something that we've also got to tackle. I think that links into the education point that James made in his comments in response to some of the questions. And that education is not just residents, it is, you know, our own team, but, you know, on balance, our team are having to expend a huge amount of energy and cost. £3 million per annum is £3 million that can offset budget pressures that we're currently facing, £3 million that can go towards required, necessary, essential, fundamental, critical frontline services. And it's time for all of us to mobilise the wider resident community to step up and step in to keep Newham clean. So thank you very much for that, James, and for everyone's contributions. So, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, it was you. Yes, you had a question.
I was at the end, yes. Oh. I did comment on it. It was not a question because obviously Councillor Beckles and I have talked about this a lot, but see this particular piece sits under enforcement, but lots of what we've been talking about sits under my portfolio. And I think it's important just to add into this that this isn't something that's being done in isolation, because all these bits have to join up together, because Councillor Ruiz rather preempted it by kind of pointing out that it needs to work in join up. So there's lots of work going on in my portfolio, which we'll be making announcements and bringing more information to council in the next few weeks. But I think it's worth saying, and for any residents watching, they are hopefully aware we have brought back in-house the 3 different cleaning companies. The structure of that was making it hard for us to deal with this. You can't, because they were operating as 3 different companies in one borough. Bringing those back in, it gives us a lot more resources and a lot more flexibility to tackle that. That'll work with the stuff that Councillor Beckles is bringing in terms of the enforcement side. Picking up on the question around education, we're doing stuff for schools. In the summer, we did a lot of litter picking, taking schools out. I think the mayor is right around community engagement. There are lots of litter picks being organised by local communities, because the majority are people who, as Councillor Parkway said, want to live in a clean borough and are suffering at the hands of a minority who just aren't picking things up. And I think the point about people have got to, but where they don't know how to deal with it and are getting stuck with it, we need to help them. So education is coming in terms of we'll be looking to design out our fly tipping hotspots. We're going to stop talking about fly tipping and start talking about illegal dumping, so it makes sense to people. We're going to help people in their community litter picks, and we're going to fundamentally restructure the way we clean the borough, as Councillor Ruiz has pointed out. You know, we're going to move away from what we've currently got, which is just litter picking, and go back to sweeping. People are going to have brooms again, because just picking things up doesn't work. So we're doing lots of work, which I'll be making announcements about, but that will tie in with Councillor Beckles' work in enforcement. So to the residents watching, we get it, we understand it, we know it's a problem, and we're going to sort it.
Thank you very much. So are there any other questions? No, colleagues? I am going to draw everyone's attention to the recommendation on big page number 500. So let's go round. Councillor James Asser.
Agreed.
Councillor James Beckles. Agreed. Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway.
Agreed.
Councillor Terry Paul.
Agreed.
Councillor Zulfikar Ali.
Agreed.
Councillor Shabbat and Mir Roxana Fiaz agrees. Okay, and on that note, we'll conclude Cabinet, formal proceedings of Cabinet. Before we close for the evening, I just really wanted to take a moment for us to collectively convey our deepest sorrow and horror at the revelations relating to Sarah Everard's murder, and also of the 80 women that have been murdered through the awful violence against women and girls between Sarah Everard's murder and Sabina Nessa's murder, and those local women who over the past couple of years have been found murdered. And may their families be provided peace during what has been and is and will continue to be a desperately awful and painful period. And for all the women in Newham and girls, please do be assured that we remain absolutely focused on your safety, and we'll be making more announcements in the coming weeks on that front. So on that note, I wish you all